mics and cameras are off. We will record this meeting. Pop your questions in the chat at any time, and we will make some time at the end to answer them. So we are really firmly now moving on to the main topic of Archives Week. We've had talks about some of the sub-themes around music and archives, around interrogating your family history, and about electronic records management. So today, Mr. Niklas Zimmer is going to talk to us about Beyond Paper, how digital transformation is reshaping our approach to archives and records management. And he's also specifically going to talk about AI and AI assisting workflows. So just to introduce our speaker, Niklas is the Digital Scholarship and Data Curation Manager at FC Tech, a leading provider of digitization technology and services across Africa. And his many expertise and experience lies in enhancing the accessibility and preservation of documentary heritage through intelligent document processing and innovative data management practices. So Niklas didn't want me to go on and on and on about, but he has an extensive CV and he's well qualified to talk to this. So without any further ado, we will hand over to Niklas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Would you prefer for me to put the camera on or leave it off for sharing the presentation?
Totally up to you.
Okay, well, in fairness to the audience, when I'm speaking to you, maybe I should just say hello with my face here. I'm a real human still. I don't know how much longer that will happen. I already see lots of non-humans in the chat. I don't know what they all called these days, Read AI and fireflies and all sorts of things. But how nice to see such a big group of people. I'm really honored to be here today. I've got way too many slides, so as a note of warning, or just to say, I don't expect you to read everything. These will be shared. I think I shared the link earlier with Helen, which you can pop in the chat and then you can download them at your leisure. So yeah, Beyond Paper. So some of what I'll say is provocative, and that's a little bit on purpose. And some of what I say might be not new to you. I'm considering this for a very broad audience of interested of people passionate about archives. So I'll be taking you through very briefly archives in a digital world, and then I'll just do some sort of demo-y stuff about what can be done with artificial intelligence in the archive once it's digital. And then, just things that you can do yourself right now, right here, and then looking at how that would scale up to when you use sort of big professional paid-for systems, not sort of the free tools that I'll be using to demo something. So if that sounds interesting, grab your cup of tea and let's have a look. Archives in a digital world. So I'm arguing that we do need a new mindset for this environment. We need to consider that on the one hand, and I'm dealing in cliches right now with this slide, but on the one hand, we have this sort of traditional paper archive represented by this overflowing file cabinet. It's not meant to disparage anything. It's just meant to illustrate. This is information that's sitting in one space and is only accessible in that place. And then at the same time, we have this absolute proliferation of current data, email archives and websites and tweets or X's or whatever they're called these days, and WhatsApps and so on. And all of that data is also historically relevant and actionable and needs to be kept and sorted in some way, alongside with whatever we might have made digital of that paper pile on the left-hand side. So Where we need to get to is some sort of structured environment like those servers sitting on the right-hand side with lots of metadata connecting all the bits and pieces. And that coherence is really difficult it's quite a wicked problem. But it's one that we need to face. And I think that's one place where artificial intelligence can help us. So what's at stake when we're talking about digital transition or digital transformation? What are we actually talking about? So we're talking about born digital and digitized materials that are often scattered. They're not organized, or they're organized according to different principles, and that organizations are often not documented. So we need to acknowledge that storage and preservation are not the same thing. So just storing stuff, as I'm sure everyone has lots of experience with by now, just storing stuff is almost more of a risk than not keeping it at all. Digital preservation is something quite beyond mere storage, right? Digital preservation gives context to data that's being stored. And so we need to really reimagine archival workflows. We can't just be digitizing things. We need to do a lot more once things have been digitized. So as a word of warning, or that sounds a bit heavy, but as a word of caution, digitization shouldn't be started without a plan in place for how you will preserve the content that you're creating going forward. So we need to move from scanning and storing stuff to a digital ecosystem. So we capture, but we then enrich what we've captured with metadata. We package these data in a preservation environment. We make some of these data publicly accessible or accessible to specific users via some kind of access and discovery platform. And we also, very importantly, take feedback and let that archive, that digital archive, evolve, much like we do with traditional physical archives, where also that are also not static, as every archivist knows. It's actually a work of deep professionalism and passion. And then the process sort of starts again of ingesting and capturing things. So digital transformation just puts another whole spin on things, where we're looking at aspects like digitization, access, metadata, AI, automating processes, community engagement online or hybrid, like we're doing now, and so on. So, and I've put the question mark there. I'm sure there's lots more that you can imagine sitting there right now, wherever you are, and what brought you to this talk. So I'm going to just throw out a very few use cases for artificial intelligence in archives. So one thing it can assist with is content understanding and interpretation. It can summarize and analyze. It can extract themes and patterns and gaps. Another use case is for description and discovery. It can generate keyword indexes, taxonomies. It can make suggestions around metadata. It can support you with creating linked data and semantic tagging for discovery tools. It can enrich oral and audio material, for example. It can do transcription and annotation of oral history interviews. It could detect topics, entities, and sentiments, also across spoken narratives, not just written text input. It can help with translation and analysis of text across languages. It can detect cultural nuances and socio-political context in parallel text corpora. It can be used for creative and educational use. You can use it to draft exhibition labels, fictional diaries, podcast scripts, etc. And it can enable interactive public history through enhanced storytelling. And I'll give a few practical demonstrations. So I took one single scanned newspaper page for these next few slides to demonstrate what can happen with just one input. So recently we've been asked to do a scanning project here in our bureau in Pardon Island, the Cape Town branch. Oops, the sharing just stopped. Let me just go back to the PDF. Here we go. And so what I'll be showing you is all entirely based on that single newspaper page. So there's one of our scanners, scan operators. Tamir busy scanning that page. And once it was scanned in, I just started basically, I fed it into a chat bot. I use ChatGPT, but you could use any other one. I'm sure they're equally have all their different uses. And if you want to know more about prompting, I found this particular prompting guide extremely useful. It's linked down below, promptingguide.ai, and there's lots of prompting techniques that you can learn about there. But even without learning much about it, here are a few prompts that you can simply copy. I seem to have issues with sharing this PDF. Sorry about that. If this happens too often, then I might need to ask someone else to share. So these are prompts you can try right now. So all you do is take something like, for example, in this case, that newspaper page, and say, extract the full text from this scanned newspaper page. Or you go, give me a line-by-line transcription, preserving column structure, or identify and separate advertisements, articles, and public notices from this particular page, right? So what it does is not just optical character recognition, OCR, as we all have become familiar with, but it does something more than that because it reasons, and that reasoning allows it to do things like, for example, extract the publication title, date, and issue number, and it gave me this output within seconds, right? This would have been a little bit of work. It's not difficult, and none of it is magic. It's just a huge time saver, right? It just does this almost instantly, right? But beyond that, I can also ask it to highlight the areas where it wasn't so sure what it was reading, right? So this is the output it gave me. This took a little bit longer because it had to generate an image, but so it took about half a minute maybe. But it was also a very big scan that I gave it. So it highlighted the areas with uncertainty about the optical character recognition or possible misreadings. And this is where you start to see the reasoning. So the OCR gave it Gator Day, but then it reasoned and it made it into Saturday. It corrected it, right? And same with dwelling. It didn't read the dwelling, but it figured it must mean dwelling, etc. So it even gives confidence values, which you see here with conf 35, conf 55, conf 30. So originally it had seen Muslim with followed by a colon. Then it corrected it to Muslim without. Or in the original it saw R dot and it corrected it to R, etc. So, and then it can give you an entire list of those corrections as a comma separated value or some sort of tabular data output if you want. So now moving on from this sort of very technical initial just getting the data off the page, because we want more than just the pixels from digitization. The pixels are just a cloud of zeros and ones. They don't help us as humans, right? But as humans, we want to learn from this, right? We want to actually work with what's there on that page of text, the imagery and the meanings in the words, etc. So now we can move to this next level and say, let's map this logical structure. We're moving away from just text blocks to now entities, because these are adverts, right? This is the Grafrenet advertiser from 1895. We want to learn from this. So we can do things like list all advertisers mentioned on this page and what they're selling. Create a JSON and a CSV export. So these are just data types where metadata is packaged in a certain way with structured metadata per ad block. And really, if I tell you, it took maybe 10 seconds for this output. So it listed to me every advertiser, the products that they're advertising. It inferred a kind of sector that is happening in, a location, and the data is obviously all from that day that advertiser was published. But you see how very quickly you get from and I'll just remind you of what that looks like. That scanned page looks like this, right? Which is different fonts and different legibility, Some things kind of creased and faded and rubbed out, etc., and going in all sorts of directions on the page and at different scales and font sizes, etc., to a very, very neat, well-structured and already sort of pre-analyzed list of outputs, right? Then I can go even further. I can look at thematic analysis. I can look at interpretations, right? So not just the data as it is there, but now actually inferring further meaning. So asking questions like, visualize economic life in the Grafrenet in 1895 as an infographic. And again, it took about half a minute to generate this image, and it gave me these neat sort of four categories: retail, property, health, and food. And through its interpretation of the contents of that one newspaper page, it backs that up, and it even creates a little infographic, a little picture, a little icon underneath each one, just to make it more accessible. Another question I prompted: find all mentions of. Oh, I must apologize for the screen sharing. There's an issue there. Hope you can see. Gender-specific marketing. So how were women addressed as customers? And again, within a few seconds, I got within the category of clothing and fabric, as per the example of the ad by Dewdney Brothers. Women were addressed as buyers and users of dress materials and household linens. They were expected to manage wardrobe and soft furnishings purchases. In terms of health remedies, women were addressed as regular consumers of so-called restorative pills and tonics, and they're presented as susceptible to fatigue, biliousness, and emotional imbalance, etc. So we're already going far beyond simply extracting text from a page, which, even until now in itself is difficult just from the technical point of view. But now, together with the sort of artificial intelligence reasoning of a large language model, can do so much more than simply extracting data. Another question is colonial and racial dynamics. How are they reflected in the language and in the content of that page? And I actually prompted it just to see. I actually prompted it in that way twice. The first output I got was like this: language and audience, entirely Eurocentric, white settler oriented, etc., etc. The next time I prompted it, after a little bit of back and forth, right, it gave me this kind of image. It looked at implied hierarchies in advertising, so products described with terms like pure and for ladies, upholding colonial values. Silences on omissions, no mention of black, colored, or indigenous individuals. Now, obviously, also, this is just a large language model. This is not a human making any of these, but it's based on human inputs, right? And there's, of course, lots of discussion necessary about where all these inputs come from and all the copyright cases that are still pending, and that will certainly not stop. And of course, it has implicit biases of its own. But the fact that it can produce an output like this, that we can then argue with, is quite remarkable. Another one is I prompted it to compare health product adverts to modern equivalents. So what do they reveal about public health beliefs in 1895 in Grafrenet as per the single page of the advertiser, compared with, and look how it immediately knew I was in South Africa. So it compared with Dischem and Clicks and Wellness Warehouse. So without asking me, it didn't just assume, say, for example, an American or a European bias. It noted from where I was asking from. So it didn't it compared in a sense like by like, or it made an attempt at going like by like. So quite interesting looking at, like, for example, health understanding. So in 1895, there's still a sort of humoral theory, a theory around the humors, and a moral approach to wellness, and so on. So nowadays we don't get talked to or messaged to like that anymore, because we're much more well educated in terms of health issues. So There's germ theory, public health science, and psychology involved in the modern health ads. So very, very thorough already in terms of how speedily those outputs were produced. It also can obviously create a sort of outputs based on different assumed levels of intellectual approach or understanding. So I asked for a classroom-friendly visual discussion prompt poster based on this sort of more scholarly data output. And I had to specify that it's horizontal so I can make it bigger on the slide. And it gave me this, health products, then and now, 1895 versus now. Cure-all claims versus specific benefits.
Sorry,
Vague,
Nicholas.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure if the slide moved on.
Oh,
We're on the slide that says visualize how colonial and racial dynamics are reflected.
oh, okay.
Now we seem to have got Nicholas stuck as well. Bear with us. We will try and get him back. Okay, so I see Nicholas is re-entering the meeting, and I'm sure we'll share his slides again from where we left off. So apologies for that, everyone. Even in the digital AI era, we have these issues. Okay, great. Nicholas, we're back on. Now we can see the health products then and now. Thank you. Okay, Nicholas, we're not hearing you though.
It's on mute.
Okay.
Yes, now we can hear you.
All right. Okay. Okay. Teams is hell bent on making my life difficult.
Okay, now we can hear you and see your slide now about health
Okay.
products now and then. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So you can see here that it's extrapolated, the sort of four core ideas, aimed at women versus aimed at wider audiences, there's no regulation here versus there's obviously strict regulation nowadays. And there's a sort of key idea to pursue for the learners. How has public understanding of health changed over time? And again, arguable, of course, but as an initial output, quite impressive. Another prompt I tried was summarize the main concerns of the town's residents as implied by the content on the page. And it gave me these five sort of key environments: economic life, domestic stability, health and wellness, agriculture and trade, social status, and so on. And I just want to remind, this is just from a single page. So obviously, you can imagine that with such a tiny sample size, some of this is maybe a little bit ridiculous. You know, it almost looks like it looks very impressive, but it's really based on one page. But imagine you feed it the entire say decade of the advertiser, or at least a significant set, or you start to put other newspapers into the mix and so on, and you can start understanding that this could become quite serious for research. Here, for example, again, tried the same sort of prompt twice. Initially, I said, okay, so construct a thematic tag cloud or topic map of this edition, and I got this, and I didn't find it useful at all. It looks fun, but it doesn't really help me with anything. So I changed it slightly, and I said, construct a thematic tag cloud. So I can't see, or topic map of this edition, and asked it specifically to give me these things grouped. So now I find this actually very useful. So under the heading of gender and society, I get these terms that are being used on that page: ladies, corsets, servants, etc. Under health and medicine, I see pills, liver, biliousness, doctor, dentist, cure, etc. And that I can start to probably work with further. So sometimes it's also about, moving around a little bit and seeing how the thing responds. I'm taking us sort of level by level now. That we're starting to sort of explore tagging, we can also start comparing and connecting data. So looking at network graphs, timelines, a comparison of price listings, subject tags according to various taxonomies. And there goes the screen sharing again. I mean, I'm not even I'm not even touching this computer. I hope you can see
We
the
can see
slide
now,
that's
yes, the tagging.
Right, so here, for example, now I took another source. I took a 1908 page, so just from 12 years later, and said, so link this issue with another one from 1908. So identify recurring themes. So under property and auctions, where it said public sale at Brummelsdam, dwelling, house and garden, furniture, etc. In the 1908, it said residential town property, Grafrenet Board of Executors sale, etc. And some things might initially, it's just lots of words, right? But you can drill down further, and you see, when you look at network graphs, for example, companies, people, and places mentioned in such and such an issue. When you take another input, you can do things like, for example, so here's the other page, right? Nothing has changed in terms of the header of that newspaper in 12 years. But in terms of the content, and I mean, we can all appreciate reading the content of a page like that will take you a significant amount of time. It'll be quite painful. The text is tiny, and as I said, some of it is very difficult to read for human eyes. But here, within seconds, I can get a comparison of historical price listings over this decade. So 1895 versus 1908, to visualize inflation trends. And all of a sudden, I can see at a glance newspaper advert prices, tooth powder prices, milk per tin prices, white muslin price, etc. Or I can convert that into a visual slide, something a bit more friendly to look at, again, maybe with some learners in mind, and looking at like 1895 everyday items like milk tins sold for so much, whereas 1908, the price of key goods has risen by 30 to 60%. And obviously, this still needs lots and lots of historical sort of let's say interrogation and further research, etc. But as a very quick way of getting text and data off a page and into some kind of relationship with one another, it's very, very useful. So, and you can continue, right? I mean, these are just further examples. So once you have two pieces to compare with one another, you can do things like, how did advertising change in terms of content, language, and visual presentation. And what do these shifts in advertising tell us about economic, technological, cultural changes in the Ghafranet, etc.? Who's the ideal consumer, etc.? So you can see, and it will give you notes, trends, shift towards an agricultural economy, rise of professionalization, move toward modern copywriting, and so on. Some of this is a bit funny, right? Especially if you're a subject expert in any one of those fields. But as you can see, even with one additional piece of input, it starts to generate something that can be meaningful, can point to a very meaningful export. So, for example, I can do a comparison. How are gender roles portrayed? Has there been a change? Whose voices are made visible in the public record, whose are absent, and so on. For example, it seems to be noticing that there's a decline in the gendered advertising tone between 1895 and 1908. I'm sure that's not enough sample data, but it can do things like that. What kind of civic order is being projected through the newspapers? So you can prompt it to give you an output. How do the 1895 and 1908 editions reflect the presence and the priorities and the communication styles of local institutions? So, for example, the named institutions, CR Board of Executors and Grafrenet School Board vis-a-vis, could be a trend to more formal institutional branding. Or there could have been a transition towards structured public administration. So, and I mean, there are countless such prompts that you could come up with. Now, moving more towards the sort of public engagement and storytelling, you can do things like, turning your content into a narrative and insight for diverse publics. So you could say, write me a short museum-style label for this page aimed at a general audience. And Helen, I'm sorry, this one is way more boring than the ones you had for us last week, Friday. But it's just an example. So here, and it gave me this again in a few seconds, Grafrenet advertiser, a window into settler life, etc. And it ends with a sort of very typical, we all have learned to recognize this language as ChatGPT style. This single page is more than just news. It is a curated mirror of colonial values, etc., etc. But it's not entirely wrong, right? It's a very, very good starting point. And the fact of the matter is, all of what I'm showing you now are things that I managed to pull out of this single page with the help of an artificial intelligence, of a large language model in the space of a few hours. Create a classroom poster about life in a Kru town in 1895. And what's quite nice about this is it wouldn't have been able to do this as well as we see here without that newspaper, right? The fact that we had this reasonably very, very good quality scan, that a very good quality input, so that it could actually do the work of reading it, gave it data to draw from in order to generate this. So again, these are all just little examples of playing around with it and seeing what it can do with a single page, right? What were people drinking? What did people want, right? And you can imagine giving the learners cleaned up versions of the newspaper or copies of the newspaper and working to discover the answers to the prompt. Right, and then suggest exhibit themes. This got really interesting for me. Again, it suggested 3 themes. So voices from a colonial town, thematic look at everyday life. The unwritten lives, who's missing from the page, exploring the power of omission in colonial era newspapers. Or pills, property, and Ponjis, what advertisements say about society, a study of commerce, health, gender roles, etc. And then draft 3 panel descriptions. Boom, panel 1, commerce and comfort in the Karoo. Panel 2, reading between the lines, race and silence and print. Panel 3, health, home, and the human condition. The health ads in the 1895 edition reveal more than symptoms. They reflect settler fears and hopes. Remedies for biliousness, sick, headache, and nervousness offered not only relief but reassurance in a distant and often unforgiving environment. I mean, this is a useful starting point if you're tasked with thinking through something like this. Now, hold on to your seats because I just said translate them into Xhosa. Now, I know this is maybe triggering. I don't have a way of verifying if this is a correct translation. Neither do I have that with Afrikaans. I just said translate into Afrikaans, and it gave me this. But I'm sure as a starting point, we're all grateful for a quick output like this. Of course, I'm not suggesting, please, I'm not suggesting this must immediately go into print and go on an exhibition, but it can be such a helpful tool. Now we're getting quite technical, but I know that some people in the audience are very technical and want to know about these things too. I won't spend too much time on it because we also want to leave some question and answer time later. But from the point of view of digital stewardship, right, we've got digital data to look after and to make accessible. An artificial intelligence can be incredibly helpful with all the heavy lifting around that. So, for example, create Dublin core metadata for this item. Boom, there it is. This was generated just with this prompt within seconds. The amount of work, and I'm speaking from personal experience, the amount of work involved in creating such Dublin core metadata item record was quite significant at some point. And I'm sure for other metadata standards, even much more so. And this is just pretty much instant. Now what we obviously have to do is make sure there's a human in the loop checking that this isn't total nonsense, which is perfectly possible. But as I'm looking across this, it's very, very well on its way to being perfect. Create IIIF compatible annotations for each content block. This is getting very technical, but the International Image Interoperability Forum is an important standard to comply with in open sort of historical data systems. So, and here I actually used it as a little bit of self-learning tool. So it also enabled me to it gave me an EAD record and it gave me a MODS record. So encoded archival description metadata and metadata object description schema. And I said, so give it to me in 3 languages, and it just did it. And so again, the time saving involved in needing a very technical output is enormous. And then preservation metadata, same thing. So please also consider this is all just sample data. So we're making a lot of stuff up in this case, but it created an event for scanning this newspaper page at 600 dpi using a Zeuschel OS 14,000. Wasn't an OS 14,000, it was a OSQ, but as an example of what that premise data would look like. Because what we're wanting to record is what the digital object went through on its way to us seeing it in the way we're looking at it right now. So when was the image converted? When was the OCR performed using what tool? When was what metadata generated and attached to it, etc. And now, lastly, essentially transforming this single page into a research platform. So creative applications further, right? Write a fictional diary entry of a young woman in Graaff-Reinet in 1895 based on what she might have read in this paper. And again, just as a starting point, I mean, how sweet it knew to use, to locate this in South Africa. And imagined an Anna writing, "Today was bright and clear, and already the sun was high when I fetched the paper from the stoop." Or stoop. I don't know how she would have pronounced it, but it's picking that localized language. And I asked it to make a picture of Anna sitting at her desk. I don't know how historically accurate the objects are or the roofing, etc., but it did place the Grafrenet advertiser there next to her on the desk. Quite something, quite as an ideas generator at least. And then on the slightly more serious side, generate 5 research questions a postgrad might explore using this document, group it into themes and
Sorry,
fields of
Nicholas,
study.
we've lost your slides again.
Goodness, this has to take the cake for amounts of times kicked out by Microsoft Teams. Have you ever? Can you see it now?
Yes.
I'm really sorry. I'm not even doing anything. Goodness. Okay, I hope you can see. So according to fields of study, so looking at cultural history, media studies, or medical humanities, look at the question here. How were health and medicine advertised and understood in small-town colonial South Africa? That seems to me like a perfectly generative question to start off with. Or looking at ways in which print media mediated the relationship between town and countryside in the Karoo. Then a prompt, create a mini podcast script introducing this issue as a historical object. And again, there it is. There's page 1, 1895, a Karoo morning in print. Intro music, gentle nostalgic melody fades under voice. Hello and welcome to Paper Past, the podcast we bring archival documents to life 1 page at a time, etc., etc. Lots of very sort of generative ideas, right? Exploring themes, gender and consumer culture, colonial health practices, silences in the archive. What stories does a single page of local news preserve or erase, etc. So what you can do right now with what's available to you for free is using a chat bot for exploration, feeding it samples like 10 to 50 pages. Not more than that, though. Even 10 is sometimes really problematic. And let it suggest tags, patterns, inconsistencies, etc. Other tools that are generally not so much for free can be used at scale. So running OCR in bulk, for example, using Adobe or Google Tesseract or other kinds of tools. And you can take those kinds of results that you get from those tools and give them back to an AI for structuring, analysis, and so on. So think of it as your research and development engine rather than as a factory line, which it can't do. And I don't think there ever will be working at that scale. It wouldn't work for the people that give them to us at the moment. So immediate things to try is analyze an old letter, and analyze it according to things like themes or tone, etc. Spot OCR errors, generate metadata for a folder full of scanned articles, create a standard operating procedure for a naming convention. And all of this via prompting, and even more, the more successful prompts I found are even questions, right? How would you address, like, how would you address this problem? How would you assign metadata? How would you go about tagging, etc.? Summarize, it's really, really good at summarizing. And translation, as you've seen, and I don't vouch for the translation into Xhosa, but it's given an output. I just haven't had any opportunity to check it. So in short, this is digital transformation at your fingertips. In short, you can use a free tool to design small-scale prompts or schemas with a large language model, test it, and then see how that could scale using other kinds of tools, right? And the scale thing is what I want to sort of end with before we go into Q&A, is to at least make those in the audience today aware of the fact that these kinds of tools have existed for quite a long time, and companies like the one that I work for use them in big projects like I don't even want to mention, but projects that involve millions or hundreds of millions of pages, and where there's an enormous amount of automation going on of the same kind of things that I've
Oh dear, we're going to try and get Niklas back again. Sorry about that, everyone. Just give us a moment while we just try and get Niklas back again, and we will get to some of the questions then. But please, in the meantime, do pop any questions in the chat that you want answered. We will also take a few questions with hands, but we'll give Niklas a chance to conclude now. Thank you. Okay, you're muted, Niklas, but we see you, but you're on mute. Oh, we can't hear you, though, Niklas.
There we are.
Okay, good.
I'm so sorry.
We're back.
I'm
No
so
problem.
sorry. Okay, I'm almost at the end. So just to say on the big scale systems, on the names of which I'll mention just now, intelligent document processing systems. That's where we can do the sort of thing that I've been showing you at a much larger scale. So where you capture documents from all sorts of sources, and think of that central picture that I showed you right in the beginning, of data being all over the place, WhatsApp, email, etc. Classify those documents and extract data from those, and validate it, humans in the loop, and export it into and deliver it into all sorts of other systems, like maybe your digital repository, your electronic content management systems, your CRMs, and so on and so on. So this very busy slide is one example that I've just stolen from Canon's Iris Power Scan page, because it so nicely illustrates that you can import from mobile devices, scanners, email inboxes, watched folders, cloud sources, etc., and then an IDP will do the sorting and indexing and quality control and so on and so on with as much, and you've learned now, confidence values and humans in the loop to create documents and put them into and draw out data and put it into places wherever you want. So you don't have to read any of this, but there are systems like Effisoft and Tungsten and DocProstar and lots of others that do this kind of work at a huge scale, where we're really talking about thousands and millions of documents, not just one page, right? So the scalability is really the key thing, where if you're working with something like ChatGPT and even together with some tools, you're limited by processing constraints and tokens and so on. Whereas if you're working with intelligent document processing, then you're working in an environment that's designed for processing high volumes of documents. So what we just saw was a very sort of flexible and creative way of working with something extracting text and metadata and structure, interpreting meaning and context, and generating these visualizations and educational content. So it's great for exploring and research and development. It shows what's possible. Intelligent document processing systems make it automated, right? You can then, instead of prompting, say, off a page or off a comparison of 2 pages, you can process thousands of pages per day. You can automate transcription and metadata tagging and classification, and you can deliver your outputs directly into digital asset management systems or content management systems or things like archive space or Atom or DSpace or whatever, wherever you need your data to go, right? Say, for example, you had 10,000 university theses that you needed the metadata to be extracted from and put into, say, DSpace. You could do that with a system like that. With ChatGPT, you can take one of those PDFs and have metadata made for it on the fly, like I showed you, like, for example, Dublin Core, but you can't do it with many. Okay, my last slide is just please be aware of the Isivivanis-Solwasi Digitization Dialogue Coalition. There's a website there, isddc.org.za. I think that's a really, really strong opportunity for us to have these kinds of conversations more often and more regularly and sort of more two-way, because today I'm just talking at you. And with that, if you want to subscribe to my weekly AI updates, there's a QR code there. Click on newsletter and fill in your details and you'll be part of it. And I hope I haven't gone over time now. And yeah, all open for your questions. And my apologies for the slides going offline all the time.
No problem. Thank you so much, Niklas. It was, I mean, I think we will all agree that some of our jaws were on the floor. So thank you so much, and making it accessible to a whole range of audiences. I see your hand but we're going to just go to a couple of questions in the chat, because there's a number of people asking about implicit biases that you've detected from your fiddling around, and also about your experiences with accuracy. So, and then I'm just going to group that with somebody asking about how does original handwritten documents affect it? Because obviously you looked at something that was typed. So maybe we can deal with that, and then we'll come to some more questions.
Sure. Okay. I think going from the bottom up, because my memory maybe works like that better, is the handwriting is surprisingly, amazingly good. So I encourage everyone to try it. It's really fun. I've got probably the worst handwriting in the world, and I tried it out on some of my notebooks or conference notes, and it was amazingly good. And again, that goes back to that reasoning. So even if it can't read every single letter correctly, it says, well, this is probably the word for, even if I can't read for sure if that's an F or a T, because there's a likelihood of it being Tor is low. Right, so try it out, and handwriting recognition is good. Again, on the professional tools, on the intelligent document processing tools that we use, you're throwing a lot more processing power and so on at it, and it gets even better. So and with humans in the loop validating, which we have a whole team in the company that does that. Shame some of them work overnight for clients overseas. They do just that. Wherever the confidence of the machine is quite low, it gets flagged, and then a human comes in and makes a decision about what that letter might be, that handwritten letter. And the other questions around bias, none of these outputs should simply go into be regarded as final. This should all strictly be regarded as playing around. I think that can't be stressed strongly enough. It should be a sandbox, and definitely not be given some kind of final authority. It could be a conversation starter or a starting point for laborious, otherwise, laborious work, unnecessarily laborious work. Like, for example, that many people are using in this transcription of today's talk. Why sit and transcribe everything if with some confidence a machine can do it for you? It's just busy work, as it were. But I think, do not give it authority. That's really important, yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's great. So I will take one more question from the chat and then we'll go to the hand. So the other question is, how do we handle copyright for various materials sourced from the public domain? Is clearance required for each element? Who holds the copyright for insights generated by ChatGPT? Are these insights accepted in academic circles? So it's really about, all sorts of copyright issues.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm the best person to answer it. So yeah, I think I might hold too left field an opinion of my own to really give that opinion. I think sometimes one just needs to also look at basically what is possible right now. And do we sort of go against that, or do we try and work with that? So I think, for example, so I'm answering a different question in order to maybe say something about this question, but we can't forbid it at school. We can't forbid it at university. We need to sort of guide the next generation into a responsible use of some form or another. And it's similar to when things were suddenly available online, pre-AI. There was also a lot of concern around copying things and so on. And we learned some form of new approach with that. And I think it's similar with this. I think we just need to we can't turn away from it. We need to face the difficulties. I don't know what we'll do about these models having been trained in ways that weren't good to copyright holders, I guess. There was a lot of theft involved in training the model itself. In which case, maybe one can't ethically use the tool in the first place. Then one is just not using it. But if one's using it, one is sort of already with one foot in that arena of using a tool that has been trained on possibly copyrighted material. So the outputs will be, in that sense, tainted to some degree.
Great, thank you so much. There was a hand earlier. If you want to ask your question. I don't see who it was now. Okay, maybe they're no longer on the call. Are there any questions with hands that anyone would like to ask in person in our last stab at questions?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Enzo.
Okay, so the question that I want to ask is, how long will it take to preserve our history when it comes to digitization? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people glibly answer back with a thing like, how long is a piece of string? I don't want to be glib, but it's a huge question that you're asking. I don't know if it's answerable because you'd need to sort of, from where we are as a service provider, we always first want to know how many items of what kind do you want to digitize and digitally preserve, and what kinds of outputs do you need in order to follow what kind of goal in the end. And once we have this sort of numbers, we can give you an answer as to how much time and how much money and how many people would need to be involved in realizing that goal. So it's very numbers based. So if you can put a number to how many objects you've got and what you want to do with them, then it can be answered. But the way you're asking it right now is wide open. It's very, very big.
Great. Thank you so much for all the questions and for your participation. And I think we all are so grateful to starting this conversation, which I think not a lot of us in the heritage sector have begun to kind of grapple with, and we obviously need to. So thank you so much to Niklas, and thank you for everyone to participating. Please do email me. I may not get to all the ones that have asked in the chat for the recording and the slides. So please, my email is in the chat. Please do send me an email and I will make sure you get the recording. And also, if you would like to continue this conversation, anything that you weren't answered, I know that on Niklas's slides there is his contact details as well, and I'm sure he would be happy to engage with you further. So thank you so much, and we look forward to talking more about this at another time. Thank you, Niklas. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.